Hello everyone, welcome back. It's the Unstoppable Dad Project. My name is Matt and I'm back here for another solo podcast. Now, I'm just going to get right into it. Last week we did a podcast with Corey and him and I spoke about just his experience as a dad, as a father. He's got twins, so from the point of view of his journey through fatherhood, he's got double trouble compared to what a lot of us that only had one kid at a time have. But we had a really interesting conversation just around his experience, his priorities, him and his wife being such a powerful team to look after two kids at once. And before we started the podcast, Corey and I were having a conversation and I was talking to him just about some feelings and emotions and things that I went through when I first became a father. And I believe I've touched on it here. I've certainly touched on it talking to some people. But when I first became a dad throughout the period of, the end of the pregnancy through to, when my daughter was born and then for quite a few months afterwards, I went through some extremely dark times. And it's what people may call depression. I didn't actually get diagnosed with it. It was to the point where I felt I was thinking suicidal thoughts. I was looking for a way out, as selfish as that sounds, or I feel that was, looking back in hindsight, for me, that felt selfish, but I was in a pretty dark hole. And Corey said to me, Corey goes, "Are you going to talk about that?" And my initial reaction, I said yes, because I'm a little bit of a people pleaser, but I said yes. And then when I went away and thought about it, I'm like, am I actually ready? Am I to talk about this openly with people? Or is this something that I'm kind of going to keep to myself and keep to my friends and the people that I talk to about it? And I went away and I thought about it and I thought, you know what? We're going to do it and I'm going to talk about it. And I'm not saying this and I'm not going to talk about it on this podcast because I want it to be a woe is me moment. I'm not doing it for pity. I'm not doing it for praise. I'm doing it because I want to get the story out there and I want to just highlight something that I feel is so important, specifically for fathers to know when they feel like they're in a point of their life where mentally they just feel so overwhelmed and so drained that they may be going down the path of thinking extremely negative thoughts, or it might just be the feeling of completely being overwhelmed and overawed by the whole process that is happening within their life. And when I sat down and I really and I looked at that time in my life and I looked at what was going on in hindsight, there was one big thing that stood out to me where it all changed. And the thing is, when I look around and I look at what the solutions are for dads, and I look at what's being put out there, and there's a lot of stuff being put out there around, you need to go to the gym, you need to do this, you need to do that. And I mean, shit, I'm a gym owner of the last 10 years, so I'll be the first to kind of advocate that I feel like physical health is going to feed into mental and vice versa. But you do need to look after your mental health. And let me walk you through my story first before I go through what and my feelings and emotions and what I feel was the number one thing I did that really helped me get out of that mindset. And when our daughter was born and before, leading up to it and over that time, our circumstances were, I feel like they were unique. Okay, we had a business, which we had for a little bit of time. We didn't have any immediate family or support network where we lived. It was just my wife and I. And, there's a lot of things within our life that are challenging. Not in a negative way, but there's challenges that as a couple, my wife and I have to deal with in day-to-day life, and there's a lot of things that went through my mind when that first happened. And obviously, you've got the stress, firstly, that every dad has when you have a kid, and it's almost this daunting realization and this holy shit moment where you get this understanding when you see them. And some of us, I think it happens like straight away. I think others, it takes a few months, not until they start interacting and we maybe feel like we're a little bit more invested in their development, that we realize that now we've got another mouth to feed, and this little human is dependent on us for protection, shelter, the whole box and dice that you have to look after this person. And not only do you have to look after them for the now, you're committed to looking after this person for the next 20 years. This is a long-term deal, and that in itself is a big stress and a big strain for a lot of dads. It can start to be a little bit too overwhelming. But for me, I had that dawned on me quite early on in the piece. We had a business which, if I'm being honest, wasn't going as well as it should have been at that point. So that was causing not only stress and strain on me around the business itself, but then there's also the financial pressure that goes with that. So I had all these external factors that were impacting my mental state, and to a point where I felt depressed, I felt down, I felt like I had no energy, I was strung out, drawn out, you name it. I feel like I felt those emotions. And as I said before, there was times where I also had suicidal thoughts. I'm not proud to say that, but in reality, it's real. I did. And this went on for quite a few months. I would put a pretty good facade up for friends and family, try and act happy. And when, I'd come into work, you'd try and really put it out there because, I'm in a services business. So I had to try and put energy out there. But I believe a lot of, people can see through that, right? It wasn't good. I wasn't in a good space, and people could see that. And I almost remember the morning that I couldn't tell you what date it was. I couldn't tell you what time it was, but I remember the morning. And I remember the morning I woke up and I looked in the mirror, and in the place that we were in, we had this, it was a full-length mirror in our bathroom. This was the house that we were in, or the unit we were in at that time, and I looked at it, and I was just disgusted with what I seen. And I'm not even talking from a physical point of view. That's a whole other story. Was I happy with where I was at physically? Absolutely not. I just wasn't. But I was disgusted with where I was. I was disgusted with the feelings that I was feeling. Now, let me get this straight. Let me emphasize this. It is okay to not be okay. 100%. But for me, all I'm talking about now is where I was at and the feelings that I was having. And I was disgusted with where I was at. And I'm shit, something's got to change, because you've got a wife there who deserves better. You've got a daughter now who needs a dad, a physically capable dad. And not only that, you have a business and you have clients who, at that point in my life, I felt like I was a pretender. I was physically not at a point where I felt like I was capable. And here I am talking to people about a lifestyle and being physically capable and moving well, and I'm not emphasizing that myself. And all these things just compounded on top of me, and for months it felt paralyzing. These things and these thoughts that I was having just kept piling up and piling up and piling up, and it felt like I was in quicksand. It felt like the harder I tried to get out of it, the deeper I got. It kept just sucking me in. But on this morning, when I started to, I guess, have a real conversation with myself about what I was actually doing. Was there anything I was actually doing to try and reverse the way I felt, or reverse the position we're in? And when I was 100% real with myself and kind of got out of my own head and my own self-pity, self-shame, whatever you would call it, and was like, you know what? You're not actually doing anything to try and make this better. You're not talking to anybody. You're not taking any action on anything that you need to in order to start to move this forward. And I'm like, right, like I've got to start to do something. Like I've got to start. And you know what? Like when I looked at the things I wanted to change, I had a massive list of things that I wanted to change. And I looked at and I'm like, oh, fuck, like where do I start? I don't even know what the first thing I need to do is. Like I've got all these things that I need to change. And then it started to make that feeling even worse. And then you start to get anxiety around all these things that you've got to do in order to change. And I just couldn't get myself past that point. And then I'm like, I've just got to start to talk to somebody. Like I need help. I need to get help. I need to at least start to get some direction, because I can't keep doing what I'm doing where I'm actually not taking any action. You know, there's a law of physics where for every action there's an equal and opposite reaction. But on the same hand, for every inaction, there's also a reaction the other way as well too. And what I felt I was stuck in was this loop of inaction, which just caused me into this point where I just was not happy with life. I was depressed. I was feeling suicidal, like all these things in a time in my life where I should be enjoying it. I should be enjoying it. We've got a newborn. We've got, I'm happily married. I've got an amazing wife. We've got my business. I'm able to do something that I love doing, even though at that point, like I didn't love doing it. The enjoyment was being sucked out of it from all these other things that were going on. But when I really looked at it, I wasn't doing anything to change it. I was sitting there. I was waiting for somebody to save me, I guess. And I'm like, I've just got to talk to somebody. I've got to talk to somebody. And then all of a sudden, things started to shift and things started to change. I started to talk to friends, started to talk to my wife, started to kind of open up about what I was going through. And I've got a great support network. I've got a good support network where people were willing to help and people were willing to give me a hand. They weren't going to do the work for me. They weren't. Like someone's not going to change your circumstances for you, but there's going to be plenty of people there who are going to listen. And there's going to be some people there that are going to give you their opinion on maybe what you should do next or how you should do stuff. And the number one thing, and the whole point of doing this podcast, is not to talk about if you're not happy with yourself physically, go and do something. Because I look at what's out there for dads and it talks all about like, hey, you got to get up and exercise every day. You got to meditate for 10 minutes every morning, and you've got to do this and you've got to do that. But I can tell you from my own experience that when you are at that point, the thought of even doing some of that stuff is so overwhelming and so consuming that it is not the first thing that needs to happen. The first thing that I needed to happen for me was to open up and start talking to somebody. Because by doing that, by opening up, by talking to my friends and my family and what it allowed me to do was it allowed me to create some space, some mental space and some mental energy to then start to address the other things, to then start to add in some physical activity, to then start to add in some stuff that I needed to do to start to move the business forward. But without that first step of talking and opening up, the rest didn't happen, because I just physically didn't have that mental energy and that mental drive to be able to even comprehend what needed to be done with that other stuff. And that first step for a lot of people is going to be different. It's going to depend on how deep in the hole you feel you are. That first step may need to be, for a lot of people, going to a GP and trying to get a mental health shared care plan to go and talk to a professional. I felt like I didn't go that route. because my initial one was to talk to my friends and my family, and that started to turn the wheels in the right direction. And it wasn't instant. It wasn't like, hey, I just had this one conversation with people, everything's changed, I'm good to go. Like, it was incremental. It took a couple of months to happen. I mean, if I'm being 100% honest, it probably took a good year before I really felt like I was out the other side of it. And, you know, I get a little angry at myself at times because that lack of action from me, I think, robbed me of feeling some things that when we had our son, I was able to do that from like a bit more of a clearer head, you know, so I was able to experience that, and I maybe didn't experience the full gamut of joy that I may have had I not felt like that, but it doesn't matter, it's happened, like that's my experience. And, you know, hopefully by kind of sharing this and putting this out there, if nothing else, it's going to encourage other fathers who feel like that. And I can't even articulate the feeling that it is, the crushing, overwhelming feeling that paralyzes you to the point where taking action just seems like it's insurmountable. And I think one of the biggest problems with, I shouldn't say it's problems, maybe not the right word. The biggest struggle that I had when it came to taking action was I was looking at taking action on things that were maybe a little bit too much for me to take action on. Because as much as I believe that long term, looking after yourself physically is going to be one of the best ways to keep your mental health in check, in that moment when it had gotten so bad and it had gotten felt like so crushing and so defeating, that the mental health needed to be taken care of first before I could even look at like the physical side of things. Like, I needed to go and talk to somebody. And a lot, like, if you're really in that, looking at it in hindsight, like, probably one of the things that I should have done is I should have gone and sought professional help. I was lucky enough that it didn't get to the point where I did something I shouldn't have done. I was able to get out of it through a good support network of family and friends and people that were around me. But you know, I probably should have gone and, you know, got professional help. And I know in Australia now, if you're worried about it, like, I know money's a big thing. Money's a big thing when you're a father. You don't want you will go without 100% of the time if it means that you can provide your children and your family with something. I completely understand that mindset. And for another time and another place, another podcast, I'll talk about why you need to look after yourself first in order to effectively look after them. But if money's an issue and you're struggling, you're like, I can't go and talk to, you know, a psychologist or a professional because it's too much. Like, it's just too much money. $120, $140 a pop's too much. Go and talk to your GP, because I know in Australia now they've got a mental health shared care plan where you will be able to go and talk to your GP. They can give you a referral where they will cover the cost of going and talking to somebody. And by starting that process, it may be what you need to start to turn things around and start to not feel like that. And, you know, it's the number one thing that, and I know I've emphasized it a little bit, but I wanted to go into my story a little bit more because I understand the feeling. No one's ever going to truly understand what you're feeling. They're your feelings alone. And it doesn't matter how much people say, oh, I understand. They're never truly going to understand because it's unique. It's unique to you. But the number one thing when you're feeling like that is you need to talk. The good thing about what's happening now is this conversation about talking and opening up is becoming more prevalent. But there's a lot of people that are out there that advocate action on different things, and you need to take action to change. I'm one of those people. But I'm also one of those people that say sometimes you need to pick the right action for where you're at. And sometimes the action doesn't have to be super dramatic. If you want a dramatic change, you've got to take dramatic action. But to begin with, the thought of taking dramatic action for some people, and I've been there, I felt like I was there, when you feel like you just, doesn't matter what you do, it doesn't matter. You feel like you're getting yourself deeper and deeper. Sometimes that action needs to be just as simple as opening up and talking to your spouse, talking to your parents, talking to your friends, and if needed, talking to a professional. It needs to happen because as fathers, we need to be... I'll talk a lot about being physically capable. But if you're not mentally capable, not only are you... It's one thing for you to suffer in silence, but I can tell you now, and I can tell you from experience, by you suffering in silence, whether you think they are or not, everyone else around you can suffer as a result of that. And I don't know a single dad that wants their wife or their family to suffer. I don't. It's not... I don't think it's in us as fathers to do that. So look after yourself, look after your mental health. And the number one thing that I guess a piece of advice I could give anybody that feels like that is talk. Open up and talk to someone. Reach out. Get some help, because by doing that, you can then start to address the other things that need to address. Not happy with the way you look, but you feel like you're in a hole and you don't know where to turn, go and talk to somebody. Create that mental space within your mind so that then you can start to address the bigger things. Okay? Not happy with the job? Well, maybe you just need to talk to somebody first, because then you can start to formulate a plan of how do I get out of this, or what's going to be my next step. So I can tell you right now, I sat on it for months and months and months and months. And when I was real with myself and I looked at myself in that mirror on that morning and I'm like, this has to stop. What do I need to do? And I found out that, I worked out with myself that I wasn't really taking any action. I wasn't asking for help. And how can I expect things to change without taking that action in the first place? So a little bit, I guess this is a little bit deeper than, and earlier on in the piece than what I was going to kind of talk about this. Hopefully it's giving you guys an insight into how my journey as a father started out. And I don't want anybody to feel like, I'm not saying this for pity. I'm not saying this for praise. I'm saying this because I think that, and after having a conversation with, having that conversation with Corey last week and having a talk to some of other people, it's sometimes you need to hear that we're all in this together, and the way you feel is not isolated. Yes, it is your feelings, and yes, some people won't understand, but it's normal to feel down, and it's not a magic pill either. I still have times where I don't feel like, I get in that kind of state again. But I'm better equipped now after talking to people and taking some action on the things that I needed to do to deal with that. And I come out of it a lot quicker than what I did, rather than just letting it drag every other aspect of my life down. And that's where I'm at. That's my initial journey. In saying that, I love being a dad. I love being a father. I've got the two most beautiful children in the world. And my wife is the most supportive, amazing person that I have, and a lot of those feelings were self-imposed for me. It's not that it's wrong. It's just what it is and what I felt. And, this podcast is not meant to be medical advice. It's not meant to be mental health advice. I'm just giving you my experience and what worked for me. But you need to, if you are struggling, you need to reach out. If not for you, if you feel selfish in doing it, you need to do it for your family. So everyone needs to take care of each other. If anyone needs help, go talk to someone. There are avenues where financially it will not be an issue. But you need to take care of yourself, guys. You need to look after yourself so you can look after your family more effectively. Okay? Be unstoppable. It's what this podcast is about. Hopefully giving you the tools and the interviews and the insight into how you as a father can be unstoppable. That doesn't mean we get knocked down. That just means we keep going. You're going to get knocked down. You're going to get knocked back. You're going to not feel great at different times. But that action is going to cause a reaction. And inaction is going to cause a reaction as well. And inaction will generally cause a reaction in a direction that we don't want it to go. Whereas if we take positive, affirmative action to move ourselves away from a place that we are unhappy, it can help. All right, guys, that's it for another week. Hope you enjoyed it. Let us know. Let me know if you've got any questions or you've got any topics that you'd like me to cover off. Either let us know on our Facebook page. the Unstoppable Dad Project Instagram page at the Unstoppable Dad, or via email. Send us some messages. Make sure you like, share, and subscribe. Thanks for listening. I'm not sure how I feel about that podcast, but it went pretty deep and let you guys into a pretty deep insight into myself and what was for me a pretty dark time in my life. But now it's awesome. I love life, love my kids, love my business, love my wife. I love doing this podcast for you guys. So hopefully you enjoy it. Thanks again, team. Have a great week. We'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.